Welcome to today's webinar, courtesy of the Kentucky Small Business Development Center right here in Louisville. We're all about hooking you up with free, super secret business coaching and training services. It doesn't matter if you're just dipping your toes in or gearing up for a big expansion. We've got the goods, the tools, and the know-how to help you win. To get the scoop, cruise on over to LouisvilleSmallBusiness.com or hit us up at 502-977-5800. Big thanks for tuning in to today's webinar. Feel free to drop your questions or chat it up with our speaker using the chat feature. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Toolkit Tuesday. Today, we are going to chat about whether to franchise or not. That is the question. We are joined by Chris Mybers and James Louie, partners in the franchise department. And they are joining us right now as we all get on screen. If you would mind sharing where you're joining from in the chat, your name, and we will be monitoring the chat throughout the session to make sure we get to answer all of your questions as well. So let's see, Jennifer from Lexington. Hi, Jennifer. Let you all pop in here. Molly, Nashville. Awesome. From Pure Sweat. Okay. Janet, hello from Southern Indiana. All right. Well, James, Chris, I will let you all get started on whether to franchise or not. Can't wait to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. I will, I'm going to share my screen here. So we have a couple of fun slides to show. Chris, Claire, can you confirm you guys can see that okay?
Yes.
We can see it.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Well, my name is James Louie. It's nice to meet everybody. This is my business partner and co-founder of the franchise department, Chris Mybers, here below me on screen. We are here today. It's a pleasure, first of all, to be here today. We were lucky enough to be introduced to Dave and the Kentucky SBDC team through a friend and a client and a partner who actually is located in Louisville. So make sure I give her a quick shout out, Katie Daniel, and the Ambition Fitness team, who I believe is a client and longtime friend of the Kentucky SBDC. So we've had the pleasure of working with Katie now over the course of a couple of years as she goes through this exact process. Yes, we're lucky to be here, happy to jump on and talk through a bit of our experience, and as we think about the question to franchise or not to franchise, how we would evaluate and work with our partners, our clients, and brands that we speak to and deal with on a daily basis as they try to figure this out for themselves. So as we dive in here, just a quick reminder again, myself, James Louie, my partner, Chris Mybers. I'm actually located, I don't see any Cleveland, Ohio attendees on here yet. Maybe we'll get a couple. I'm located up in Cleveland, the northeastern part of the state. Chris is, and the majority of our team, a few of whom are on here, are located in Cincinnati. So right down the road from a majority of our people on here today. So Chris and I, and a lot of our team now have been working together for a long time. We were formally founded as a business in 2022, but are combined with a fantastic team behind us. Mel Burmett, Vince Chepikaitis, Chris Hebden, and a slew of a few others who combine for a substantial amount of franchise experience. And again, I say Chris and I, as well as a few other team members, started working together specifically 10 years ago on a few different franchise projects. As many people will find as you hear in franchising, we all sort of fell into this world, this industry, and learned very quickly the good and the bad of franchising your business and all that becomes associated with it. And over the time that we've known each other and worked together, we've been lucky enough to partner with brands both in the emerging category as well as those who are nationally established. And as we talk about the differences there, we'll consider emerging typically 10 locations or less currently open, and some of those more nationally established brands sometimes eclipsing the 50, 100 unit level as they are categorized, and have been lucky enough to do so across the U.S. as well as Canada. We have a little bit of international experience as well, London, Dubai, a few different areas. But we work with brands across all industries, and we've been in health, wellness, fitness, restaurant, QSR, personal services, as well as home services based businesses. We've had the privilege of working with different brands, concepts, and founders across almost all industries in franchising, and have been able to learn the ins and outs of what it means to be successful, really in every corner of the industry and every facet of franchising. So just a quick kind of service overview, and you can find this on our website, thefranchisedept.com, for a little more in-depth analysis of what exactly it is that we do. But essentially, we partner with our brands to accomplish the items we see listed here: strategy and compliance, building a franchise, and then maintaining successful and appropriate growth as a franchisor is always hard, really built on a sound and appropriate strategy. But as we'll learn here in a moment, also on very well structured compliance documents and relationships. Obviously, that'll also include program development in the launch of a franchise program, or the launch of in a more nationally founded business, new strategy, and year-over-year growth. Obviously, all that includes, our ability to work with our partners on both the front end of the process, which really is franchisee partner candidates, lead generation, evaluation, validation, and then awarding. So we'll consider that the front end of the process, the time at which somebody becomes a candidate, is interested in one of your businesses to become a franchisee partner. Eventually goes through the process, executes a franchise agreement, wires their franchise fee, and officially becomes a partner. That's a big part of our service offering, as well as, of course, the operational and the support side. But as you'll find, much of our team, inclusive of, again, my partner Chris, who will often identify himself as a recovering CFO, have lived within franchise organizations on the back end of the support side, and worked with now hundreds of franchise partners specifically to be able to get from the time at which they sign a franchise agreement all the way up until they open up that new business, whether it be home services based or brick and mortar, and run off on the 10-year franchise license they have then purchased into. So that's a little bit about us. We'll talk a little bit more as we get through a bit of the why, the who, the how further on in the presentation. But and before I pass it on to Chris for some more formal fodder for conversation, we did just want to hit on high level, what is franchising? And just a reference, everyone here obviously familiar with the Kentucky SBDC. I would encourage you to go utilize a resource they have specifically on this topic as well on the website. Andy Friedman has about a 45-minute video on, hey, what is franchising specifically from the legal as well as the business standpoint. It's a very high level overview of franchising as a whole, what it means legally, how it's structured, and what the implications are from a business entity perspective, as well as, of course, a relationship perspective. We went ahead and we quoted here, just for everybody's reference and light reading material, a definition from the IFA, the International Franchising Association, which I won't bore you to read with, or I won't bore you to read through, but essentially it gives the Webster's Dictionary definition of what is franchising and what it means to become a franchisor. Now, there's a few other pieces that are important to hit on. I mentioned earlier, reference Andy's video on the website, but wanted to come back and just be clear on the fact that franchising is a federally regulated industry. The FTC regulates franchising on a national basis as well as on a state-by-state basis, and really it's made up of three specific areas. A trademark, a required exchange of funds, a payment that is going to include things like franchise fees, royalties, call them upfront fees, as well as fees over time. And then as well as of course, the relationship between franchisee, franchise partner, and franchisor. What is that relationship structured upon? And essentially, for that exchange of payments and that execution of a franchise agreement, what does that relationship look like? What does the franchisee and franchisor expect from one another? And candidly, as a franchisee, what should a franchisor provide to you on a support basis? So on a high level, those are the what is franchising. I'm going to pass it over to Chris quickly for some more of the, we'll call them basic elements of franchising. And you'll see here a number of things listed. But Chris, just if you wouldn't mind, walk us through as we think about, hey, what is franchising? And as the group thinks about really moving towards franchising, should that be the right choice? What are some basic elements of this relationship, of the business model they should have in mind?
Yeah, and thank you, James. We won't bore you with the entire litany or library of acronyms or defined terms, but the 7 listed here will kind of level set us. They're going to come up later in the presentation, and whether on this conversation or others around franchising, you'll encounter all of these and many more. But to start it off, it's franchisor, or industry geeks like James and myself, you'll hear us refer to that as the ZOR. The franchisor is the parent company, corporate company, however you define it. It's legally defined as the franchisor, the issuer of the rights to the franchise model. The other side of that conversation, or the yin-yang relationship, is the franchisee, or the Z as we refer to it. So that is the party that is granted the rights per the defined terms of the relationship. The FDD, you'll hear that a lot in franchise speak, franchise disclosure document. That is a set of offering bylaws and disclosures regulated by the FTC, registered state by state. So there is some nuance state by state. We may get into that in these conversations or subsequent. But basically, the FDD is the same for the biggest franchises on the block. If we talk about Louisville, we're talking about the Yum Brands, KFC. Their FDD is sequentially the same as any franchise that we would launch today. So we'll use the analogy or the example, Chris's Sandwich Shop. We'll use that in subsequent conversations here. So if I launched Chris's Sandwich Shop today, I'm going to have an FDD that sequentially matches what is in place for KFC. It's basically 23 items. Those items are the disclosures that tell any interested party who I am, what I do, I being the brand, of course, what I do, have I been sued, what are my trademarks, what's the requirements of the franchisor, the obligations of the franchisor in the relationship, the requirements or obligations of the franchisee, what's the financial investment, I've got audited financials in there. Again, all of that is sequentially regulated by the FTC to basically say item 2 in McDonald's FDD or KFC's is going to be the same as any new franchise that just launched off the block. The franchise agreement, or the FA, that's the binding agreement. James mentioned most common, you see a 10-year franchise agreement. That's the relationship. That's what binds the relationship and says franchisor is going to do this. Franchisee has the right to do this. And hopefully there's no default, but obviously lawyers come into play there, and there's legalese and there's teeth in there, and it's a big girthy legal document that just protects all parties. It is designed inherently to be one-sided in favor of the franchisor. That can be for those of us on the call who have a brand that maybe today or in the future we encounter that question, should I franchise? One thing to know is one of the advantages to franchising is control and maintaining brand integrity. If your documentation and your program is set up correctly, that franchise agreement is inherently one-sided. So we would say that to franchisors that we work with or franchisees that are looking to get into a brand, it is inherently favored to the brand holder or the franchisor themselves. The initial fees, those are going to be payments that are paid from the franchisee to the franchisor, most often at the time of signing. There is some nuance there based on state law or unique models that or distribution methods that might be set up, but those initial fees are most often referred to as the franchise fee. Ongoing fees, we know that, beyond franchising, you've heard the term royalties. They're not always percentage based. So royalties are some sort of fee that's paid in exchange for the ongoing operation of the business. They can be fixed, they can be variable, they can be a hybrid of both. But the ongoing fees are something that franchisee will pay to franchisor during the duration of the operation of their business or the term of their franchise agreement. And then the ops manual, the operations manual. You have a handbook, you have an ops manual very likely for your own business, whether it's brick and mortar or a service-based business there locally. The ops manual from a franchise side really kind of zooms out and encompasses such a more broad and deep level of how to. It really encompasses all of the essential systems, processes, procedures, what to do, what not to do, and operating the business. So really, we always say that is the real weight of not only the franchise program itself, but the FDD, the franchise agreement, really all tether back to that operations manual on how a franchisee is going to operate the business. And it will live and breathe. What worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. So that ops manual can live and breathe as we evolve and just get smarter about the business model itself.
Hey, and good news, Chris. I don't see anybody in here from New York or California or Washington. So your nuance on the initial fees shouldn't be too weighted in terms of some of the state legislation that may not allow those to be collected up front. But that's something we can get into if anybody is, as you think about national growth, looking to expand within some of these more difficult states on a franchise level, dive further into. But as Chris mentioned, for those who are thinking and going down the path of should I franchise my business, we list these 7 here as the real tenets for what does need to be created in order to go forward and become call it a legal franchise. Andy speaks about it in his interview and his webinar on the website, but essentially in order to offer a franchise for your business, wherever that business may be, whatever life cycle that business may be in, whatever the offering may look like, you have to legally be able to offer that franchise and have a completed franchise disclosure document and franchise agreement to be able to actually go out and offer those licenses to potential partners. And there are, as you look at the country, there are 27 states that make that very easy to do. And the rest of those become a little more difficult, whether they be filing states like Kentucky, or whether they be registration states, like a few of the more difficult ones on typically what are going to be the coasts. And Steve, yes, slides will be shared. Everything will come over as soon as we're done. I know the team at the SBDC has them. We'll also be able to share them ourselves. Okay, so to kind of wrap up the conversation on what is a franchise and the franchise structure in general, because it's something that we lean on very heavily as we think about franchising and the appropriate parties, personalities, and structures that really become a successful franchisor relationship. We wanted to just specifically highlight that when you think about franchising, you are thinking about starting long-term relationships with your potential franchise partners. And the reason we say that is because as people dive into franchising and as they think about, hey, is this the right pathway for me? It's important to know that franchise agreements as a whole range between 7 and 10 years in length. And as the franchisor essentially bringing on a franchise partner is lining you up for that minimum 7 to 10 year relationship with that party, with that franchise partner. And it's a big part of this question as we understand, hey, is my business ready to franchise? Should it franchise? But first and foremost, am I, as a founder and an owner of this business, right for the franchise relationship? We say this all the time. Franchising is and can be, when set up appropriately, a very successful pathway to growth. And it's something that can be, essentially leveraged on a much more expeditious pathway to get from, you may be a local or regional business today to become a national or international business. And, leaning on our experience a little bit more, and just as some example, Chris and I have been a part of businesses and brands and partnerships that have started as a single unit in Cincinnati, Ohio, and grown over the course of 2 years to 120 locations across the country, 350 franchise partners, and have seen the benefits of that, have also seen, of course, some of the downside that may come with some of that rapid growth. We've also been parts of businesses that have started as 3 units in Nashville, Tennessee, and have now grown to 8 or 10 units over a course of 3 or 4 years with the right franchise partners and the right appropriate growth system for them. So we highlight all this just to say, and we'll talk about it a little bit at the end, franchising is not a one size fits all from a growth perspective. It's not right for every business. It's not right for every founder. And the basis of that is the fact that you're getting into a long-term relationship with your franchise partners across the country, whether they be in your market as well, or whether they be in Portland, Oregon, or Los Angeles, California, or Vancouver, Canada, wherever they may be. It is first and foremost a relationship. The franchise agreement Chris mentioned is essentially an operating agreement that lays out the rules and the conditions amongst yourselves as well as your partners that you're getting into. The beauty of this relationship, of course, is that it's well defined. And the contracts that are in place, for those of you who already have franchise disclosure documents and franchise agreements, for those who don't, Chris mentioned they're inherently one-sided agreements in order to make sure that we're maintaining brand standard, we're maintaining the ability to have continuity across the system. And typically they're all very boilerplate. There isn't typically much room for negotiation or augmentation. And a lot of that is inherently for your own and your franchise partner's own legal protection and control. So that's kind of the end of the what is franchising question. Go ahead.
Can
Chris.
I add something to that, James? You know, if you go back to that slide, if it's possible, there is intent behind listing relationship before contracts. So as James mentioned, you know, I kind of tease, I'm a recovering CFO. Oftentimes CFO, and then a lot of, you know, in a lot of organizations, my counterpart was always, you know, somebody with an ESQ behind their name. So we should be the ones that set up guardrails and unlock the how, but operationally and branding, some of the other departments are really what unlocks the why. And so when we think about relationships in that context, it should not be, let's have the documentation and the contracts first, and then try and force into a relationship. Let's understand what the relationship is between franchisee, franchisor, the end client. If there's a, you know, brick and mortar or service brand, that entire ecosystem of those relationships, that includes vendors and partners. As we understand that, then it leads us to the contract side, because we can write documentation, whether that be the FDD, the franchise agreement, the ops manuals, anything that binds together and tells us how to behave within the relationship. Let's first define the relationship, and then let's bring in parties that match the profile of the other side of the relationship. It sounds very academic, and for most of us that are entrepreneurial, we've probably lived through the good and the bad of that. But in franchising, it's probably it's the original sin, so to speak. It is where young franchises make their first mistake, is they don't understand the relationship, and they get in the business of selling access to their brand rather than awarding. So really, and you know, that's a segue, James, to the next, you know, 2 slides from now, where we talk about you know, identifying not only the answers, but really the right questions to, you know, are we going to franchise our business? And it starts with the why. And I think some of understanding that relationship and, you know, the components of that really are unpacked in that question of, why would I franchise my business? Being entrepreneurial, as many of us on this call are, we, you know, again, I'll go back to the, you know, the example of Chris's Sandwich Shop. Chris's Sandwich Shop, had I launched that, I probably had a why. Maybe it was, you know, personal wealth, quality of life. I've got a great recipe that passed down from my grandpa, or whatever. There's a market opportunity, a great space became available, whatever. That's my why that I launched Chris's Sandwich Shop. The why to your franchise, the side of your company, which is a distinct company, by the way, it's a separate legal organization, and it should be a separate budget, model, strategy, everything that goes with that. Your why is going to be different. And the reason we say that is because your clients are different. The model's different. If you go back to, you know, again, some of the largest franchises, and we'll, you know, we've either seen the movie, you know, Founder, or we've heard just anecdotally that McDonald's, if you look at their FDD, they don't really talk about burgers. That's not what they are. They're a franchise company. They provide real estate, consultation, marketing. So their business model for McDonald's franchising, or whatever the parent company's legal name is, versus the McDonald's on the corner of Main and Main Street, very distinct business models. Their client is different. The client for the brick and mortar is the person that comes in and buys the Big Mac. The client for the franchise company is the entrepreneur, the person that wants to become the franchisee and have the rights to operate a McDonald's in anywhere USA. That distinction requires us really understanding, why are we getting in to franchise our business? And I think we start right there by understanding really unpacking the strategy. I think to launch a business without strategy, I think we all realize that that can be laden with risk. So when we work with young brands that are asking themselves, should I franchise? The first thing we tap on is the why. Why do you want to do it? And some of those components can be philosophical or internal for the founder. They may have their own, whether it's wealth related or market opportunity or just flat out ego. All of that is fine. We have all of that. But then we get into more of the tactical. What's the market opportunity? Is there a market for it, or TAM as it's called? Is there a market opportunity to take my brand and how I do it and bring it into, whether it's in my geographical market, other regions around the US or internationally? Do we feel like there's an opportunity, and am I differentiated enough as a brand that there's demand, whether they know there's demand or not? Can I tap into demand in the market? So let's first look at that. Then we're going to look at the competitive analysis. Again, a lot of this is just academic. If you're starting any business, whether it's franchise or not, who are your competitors in the space? Where are they? Are they further along than you? Do they have a better product than you? How do you differentiate and take market share? So we're going to look at that as part of our why we would even entertain going down the franchising process. And then we really build some strategy framework. That can start with high level budgeting. That can start with wireframing some of the relationships, right? Franchisee profile and things like that. But all of this on this page, and really the first question that we're going to ask is, why would my brand be ready to franchise? And if we spend the proper amount of time and do some due diligence there, I think it naturally either disqualifies, right? We might say, okay, there's not an opportunity for it. But if we feel like there is, then it's going to bump us to the next set of questions that we have to ask. Which the next set, again, the top of the slide there says, okay, I have a why, right? Great. Now I need to know, what am I franchising and how the heck do I go about franchising it? So the what is understanding the business model. That can be at a unit level. There's some nuanced, different modes of franchising. Again, that's more franchising 201, 301. So, we're intentionally keeping this conversation kind of 101 high level, but really understanding, what is the business model? What am I trying to franchise? The economics of it, the practicality. What do I need in terms of training, support? Do I have vendors at my side? Can all of them scale, right? We encounter that quite often, where we've got a vendor for the very successful mom and pop enterprise, but that vendor who you've fallen in love with, they have no ability to scale past 10, 15 units, let alone 100, 200, 300 units. So understanding what is the business model at its core. All the levels of system and support that we have to provide to really unlock and optimize the return on that business model. The business model is really the offering that we're granting to the franchisee. So what are all the systems, the support mechanisms, and how to on our franchise model that we're going to launch? What are the services and products that are inherent to our franchise model? And understanding all of that. Can they scale? Like I mentioned, can they scale nationwide? Can they scale regionally? Are they really going to optimize? Have I kind of lived with them at my local 1 or 2 brick and mortar units, and I've just kind of put up with the fact that they're not perfect, but maybe a franchisee won't accept that? So really doing a deep dive and introspective look at all the services and products that are inherent to make my business model not only run, but run successfully, and run successfully in somebody else's hands, by the way. And then what controls do I want to put on the offering? So we kind of tapped on it a couple different ways. The franchise agreement is inherently one-sided and favors the franchisor. The advantage of that is all of the brand integrity that you've created, you can maintain that. So we want to really look internally and say, what are the things that are extremely important and integral to my brand? And I'm going to really understand how I can control that in the relationship, so that, putting in layperson's terms, a franchisee could not get their hands on it and break it, because we don't want them to maybe mismanage their business, and then that erodes up to your brand and all the IP and goodwill that you've created. So when we talk about the what, the business model, systems and support, services and products, and what are the levels of controls that we want to impart on the offering itself, then that leads us to the how, right?
And
So
Chris,
go
before
ahead, James.
before we get to the how, I'm gonna bring you back for a second to specifically talk about one part of this, that without going too high on the academic chain of franchising 201, 301, back to the business model and we'll talk about the unit level economics. So there's a term in here we'll use all the time, the proof of concept, that I want to make sure we just double tap on for everyone on the presentation today. The proof of concept from an operations, a human resources, a sales and marketing, obviously those all being important pieces of the puzzle and being important things that we'll need to be able to replicate, scale, et cetera. But you mentioned something early on the business model side, is specifically towards unit level economics. And that is something, as we talk about the higher level of how we're presenting eventually a franchise offering, and some of the pieces of a model that a franchise partner, but candidly also the states in which we go to, will scrutinize heavily, is the performance on an economic basis for your proof of concept. And something we talk about a lot, you'll hear the term item 19 somewhere in the future, in terms of part of your franchise disclosure document, and that will specifically lean towards a performance analysis, a financial performance analysis on your current business, whether there be 1, 2, or 3 open units, that you will then have to consolidate and deliver on a presentation basis to franchise partners. And as we talk about the investment of one day, what will be a franchise system, the unit level economics is something that we really lean on in terms of proof of concept, and that will be scrutinized quite a bit as you go out to different states, as you go find different partners. And Chris, just really quickly before we move on to how, just to give us a quick definition of how you think about unit level economics and typically what we're looking for. As someone goes and says, hey, I want to replicate this. I've proven all of these systems. And as we think about what that profitability analysis should show, or at least be building towards, how we think about that part of the equation.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one kind of overlying is, in franchising, nothing is promised, right? That's just a matter of compliance. We never represent and say this will happen if you buy a franchise. That being said, what we want to be able to disclose candidates and eventual franchisees on, and then eventually once they sign, coach and teach them on, is the upfront unit level economics. So what's it cost to get in the business? So for a brick and mortar, that's going to be probably more cost intensive, because there's building out a space and there's long-term leases, et cetera. But what's it cost to get in the business? And then once you're in the business, month over month, year over year, what is the growth strategy? And then when fully optimized, what's the potential for return? If you think about it, just in common sense, as a common sense filter, nobody wants to spend $1 million to launch a franchise that we ourselves, being the franchisor, have never really gotten more than $100K to the bottom line on, right? So if you do the reverse math on that, I'm signing a 10-year franchise agreement. I'm spending $1 million or taking $1 million of debt or whatever to launch this business. And the high water mark for the corporate units, I brought 100 or 150,000 down to the bottom line. I'm chasing a 8-9 year return on investment. Well, my franchise agreement's only 10 years. So typically we just and there's not a perfect answer of what that should be. I'm not saying it's going to happen in a year and a half or even 4 years, but having some ability to understand, represent, and coach on the economics of what's it cost to get in the business. And once we get to a level of maturity for that unit, what are the economics, or what's the potential of getting a return on that? And if we can explain that to candidates and franchisees, and more importantly, we explain and kind of coach them on the KPIs that lead to that unit level success, that's really what we're looking for, eventually when a franchise launches. But even before that, if we're talking young brands, beyond knowing the founder, the team, and the why and the market opportunity, the next thing we dive into is how does it perform economically? Because I've never encountered any franchises that are first and foremost a 501c3. So they are all in it to make a return on that investment. So we've got to be able to tell that economic story.
Perfect. Thank you. That was one of those, as we talk about proof of concept, and inherently, as we talk about, is franchising right? That's one of the biggest things that we hit on is from the proof of concept perspective, from the potential for return on investment. As Chris mentioned, without making promise to anyone or anything, what can we disclose and dictate within our offering documents, our FDD, our item 19, in terms of how we perform historically, as well as how the business is built on a unit level from a bottoms up perspective. So thank you for hitting on that, Chris. I'll let you dive into the how now.
Yeah, the how, we mentioned that we don't really like, and no offense to any lawyers on the call, we don't want lawyers to lead the charge, but registration and compliance is just a fact of franchising. So registration is one of the steps. If you legally want to be defined as a franchise, we've got to get that FDD and all the related documents registered. They are mandated at the federal level by the FTC, but they are registered at the state level. James kind of alluded to it earlier. There are 27 non-registration states. And then the other remaining 23 states have varying degrees of, some of them just want you to pay a fee to basically, to be registered, and others are going to go through a more deeper dive and really audit your FDD and all things about your business. So it'll just take a little bit more in terms of compliance registration. But getting registered as a franchise is step number one on the how. Defining the relationship. So understanding what that relationship is going to look like, not only from a practical sense, but then we do have to bring that into the legal documentation. What is the relationship, franchisee to franchisor? Who's doing what? Where do they meet in the middle? That really is the definition of the relationship and how we're going to distribute our brand via franchising. And then this is my personal favorite as being a recovering CFO. Let's put a growth model together. Let's understand what we're trying to get, not only at a unit level, but the unit level is just a kit of the parts that fits into the larger growth model. We've got brands, and James mentioned, we've worked with some that the goal is to sell 100 or award 100 territories or units in the first year. We've got others that what's appropriate for them based on budget, based on capacity, based on their own just kind of personal wishes. They may just want to award 2 or 3 that first year. 2 or 3, let's step slowly out of the box. Let's assess it, let's optimize it, tweak it, evolve it, and then maybe we do 5 or 6 the next year. They're not looking for a fast 3-year exit plan to private equity, but some are. So understanding what is the growth model and trajectory, put a budget around that. So it's not just a 1-year plan. Typically we build a 10-year plan for our young brands so they understand what does the first year or 2 look like, but then also what's it look like once it scales and really creates, optimal value.
Oops, sorry. Jumped ahead.
So, okay, we've got a why, we've got the what, we've got the how, and then it kind of, opens it up to the next 3 sets of questions. Again, right now we're asking questions. We're not even figuring the answers. We're just trying to ask the right questions. The next 3 here are the who, the where, and the when. And the who, quite simply, is led by who are the franchise partners? What is that profile? Is it, are we running an owner-operator business model? Is it semi-absentee? Is it 100% absentee? Which is rare, by the way, to have absentee mailbox money. That is rare. A lot of brands will tout that, but it doesn't actually translate. But understanding who are the ideal franchise partners. And we typically create profiles around not only the demographic, the demographic and the financial, but then the psychographic. What kind of background do you want? Right? If somebody's going to be a traditionally stuffy CFO, maybe they're not the best in a marketing or kind of outward facing role. So understanding psychographically, financially, demographically, what sort of franchisee partners are we looking for? That could be a single unit operator, could be a multi-unit operator. There's a lot of ways to kind of skin that, but understanding who my partner is, first and foremost, we've got to establish that. Understanding the team that I need on my franchisor side to help carry out some of the systems, the brand compliance, the support, the training, to lock arms with those franchisee partners so that we can achieve their success. I have to build a team around me. A franchise is not made with just a founder, a set of documents, and wish everybody well. It doesn't work like that. We need a franchisor team. And then that team is really augmented and even supported at a broader level by all of our vendors and partners. So whether it's product, whether it's services, whether it's a tech stack, we have to know that our vendors and partners, their why and their how aligns with ours and within our franchise program, that they can scale, and frankly, that they support our brand in the best way. So understanding those three areas of the who, that's really all the people that are involved in the franchising ecosystem. My franchisee partners, my team that's going to help me drive and support, and then my expanded team, or my in-laws, if you will, my vendors and partners. So that's going to help me better define the who.
Hey, Chris, before we skip on from that, I think the first two here are pretty obvious. That the franchise partners, who that is, the avatar, who we want to have on our team, as well as the franchisor team, who internally is here to support. Those are pretty easy, obvious things to kind of wrap our hands around. What I've always noticed when we work with clients and partners who are just getting into franchising, that third section is typically the one that becomes a little more unknown and is much harder to unpack, and typically becomes the most robust in terms of who we actually are focusing on from a scalability perspective. And I just wanted to unpack that for a quick second before we move on to where the vendors and partners can come in a myriad of different categories and look, tones, feels, all of the above. But here we focus on everybody from partners like our team in the franchise department. We are more often than not considered, as we join with our brands and our partners, one of that second or third bucket, franchisor team or vendor and partner. There are groups like us that do some of the same things we do, portions of the things that we do, that partner up and help with the fundamental pieces of franchising, whether it be as fractional executives, whether it be just as a lead development and a sales and awarding team, or specifically on the support side. There is that category of franchise development partner who brings to brands a robust swath of skill sets, experience, and team members that can help you to grow. That partnership and vendors also goes as far as, if you're in the brick and mortar side, preferred national real estate site selection groups that work with you to find real estate, groups that help on the architecture side, on the construction project management side, furniture, fixture, equipments, marketing, sales, operations, human resources. You are building, and you have the luxury as a franchise partner to build a large network of, as Chris called them, the in-laws, the large table of people who come to the business and are essentially bolting on as a third-party vendor or a partner that is going to help you grow nationally, but it doesn't necessarily always have to fall on the franchisor team ledger. So this is a big one we unpack, where it's, hey, who are you working with right now? And does that scale nationally? And where should your focus be in terms of who you're working with and who you are? Again, we go back to the registration legality side of this, who you are requiring as a vendor partner. Do you have a real estate site selection partner that you know is going to be the best, and all of your franchise partners will benefit from being able to work with them, and they become a required FDD partner that everyone has to use? Or are there preferred partners in there that you still want to make sure you can recommend, but aren't necessarily required for every partner? So we spend a lot of time on that section of this in particular, and it really falls into the people and the process side of the value equation that is franchising. So just double tapping on that kind of, Chris, before you go. I think I did it for you before you jump on to the where and then the when.
Yeah, and we'll tap quickly on these. I mean, the where is, we want to know our logistical capacity, right? I mean, if we're starting a business here in Northern Kentucky or Cincinnati, where I'm at, it probably does not make practical sense for me to have my first franchise in Portland, Oregon. Frankly, it's just going to be too far for me to support and manage. So logistically, we want to look at that, but we also want to do just an overall market analysis. Where is the collection of client profile or avatar that is best going to support my brand? If I'm going into markets that already have 10 sandwich shops and I want to launch Chris's Sandwich Shop, maybe that's not the market for me. So doing a national market analysis, understanding where my brand is going to fit, both from a supply demand standpoint, available real estate, et cetera. Full market analysis will tell us where to go. We need to get registered in those states. And then logistically, just make sure that we can actually scale and carry out what we say we're going to do contractually in those markets. The when is really there's I would say it's whens. So there's multiple timeline events that we want to really understand, both within our model and our growth plan, but also within the launch of a franchisee unit. We've got brick and mortar brands that we're working with today. And I tell candidates when they come in, even before they sign, it's probably going to take them 2 or 3 months to really, do their due diligence and figure out if they want to engage in a franchise agreement, if they're awarded such. And then from there, it may take them 12 months to find real estate, build a space, et cetera. So when we look at the timing for that brand example, people that I'm talking to today, even if it culminates in a franchise agreement, they're likely not going to open that franchise unit for maybe 14 or 15 months from right now. So understanding those wins within the model it's gonna better unlock, what we need and how much we need at what time. So we understand that timeline, it really unlocks everything. And James is a master of that. We build everything like a robust Gantt chart. Everything should be an if-when scenario. Once this happens, it unlocks this. And it's just, we march it down the assembly line. So really understanding those wins, all the critical points in a development timeline it's a massive part of unlocking a franchise plan.
Okay, so Chris, before we get to the Q&A, because I know we're running up on the hour, just a quick overview. Everyone on this call who's thinking about franchising, what can they expect through this process?
First, like any business, develop a strategy and have a budget to it. If you have those goals, we understand how to measure it, it's going to unlock everything. That is the cipher that's going to lead us in the right direction. Number two, despite maybe popular or unpopular narratives that are out there, it's not easy. You didn't launch and grow your business because you just rolled out of bed and decided to. It took a lot of capital, sweat equity, maybe some blood, maybe some tears, all the above. Same with franchising. It's a new venture. There's a new why, there's new clients, there's new agreements. So it's not easy. The success can be massive, but it takes a lot of work to get there. One size does not fit all. I say that for franchisors. I would say it for a franchisee. There is not a perfect franchise for a franchisee to buy into. They have to find what fits them. And for somebody looking to franchise their business, there are a lot of ways to carve that up. And, deciding what is best for your brand and the opportunity is probably unlocked, again, going back to that top bullet point, strategy and budget. We are big preachers and advocates of not selling franchises. Frankly, if I had to boil down what is the one why, in terms of why James and I do what we do and how we do it, it's because we think the franchise program should be built solidly, and it should in turn sell itself or attract itself to franchisee candidates. And then the franchisor should be in the business of awarding their brand rights to others, not doing a hard sell. So if you're being hard sold by franchise sales organizations, put a little red flag up. If they're selling you on something instead of awarding you on something, just take that with a grain of salt. And then, like any business, make a plan, assess as you go, adapt as you go, optimize, and that's how you achieve optimal value.
Awesome. Chris, thank you for all that. I know we've got Janet, Claire, I think 10 minutes left in here for some questions, if they may be. I know we can throw them in the chat and we can answer them. Otherwise, Claire, I don't know if we've already gotten a couple in.
Yeah, let's see. I do not see any questions in yet. I'll start out with one. Before folks come to you or are, thinking about franchising, what's a good kind of setup for them just in their business operations and logistics and such to make sure that they're prepared themselves to start the process of even answering these questions?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we just from our standpoint, Claire, and the way that we've established our working relationships with our clients and our partners, and we've identified that specific question takes time to unpack. And everything we mentioned in here, the pieces of the puzzle. If someone were to say take the why, the how, the who, the what, the when, and try to accumulate some answers. obviously that's fantastic. That's, it's a great jump start on the pieces that we mentioned. But typically, before we work with anybody, we'll be able, and we really take time to really just sit down, walk through the business model, and start to uncover what we can. The last thing we want is for anybody to jump into franchising without having completely unpacked all of these questions and understood really the answer to the question, is franchising right for me? And we spend time on a free consultative basis to essentially look and unpack some of that. We will help our potential clients and partners find what we're looking for. And before we ever jump into a paid or a full-time relationship, we're always there to help answer the questions that people need to unpack and unfold. So it is, typically we'll spend 30, 60 days on that piece alone, Claire, before we get anywhere near jumping into what typically would be a phase one, which is constructing the model, constructing the business plan for the new venture, the franchise company. But it could be longer in cases. We all the time end up with partners that we met that have a great business model that we unpacked for 30, 60 days together. And the answer to the question, is franchising right, was no, it's not right now.
Yeah.
And let's spend, the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months deciding and building towards that point. So that's a big part of what we saw in the marketplace was businesses like ours who offer services like us that dive right into, you got a business, let's build a franchise disclosure document, let's get you registered, and you'll be franchising in 45 days. That's a significant investment, both in time and cost, just to get those compliance documents completed and registered. So we are really intentional on the front end to make sure that, hey, if somebody's thinking about this, like, let's unpack this together, let's learn. Chris, myself, our team will share as much as we can. And if we can't, at the end of that, 30, 60, 90-day period, answer with an affirmative yes to the fact that franchising is the right growth pathway, then we aren't going to pressure anybody into anything. We have seen, obviously, the downside to that, the personal impact that has on founders as well as franchise partners when they come into the system. And again, we can send these slides out. Anyone who wants to unpack this, take your time and figure out some of those answers to the questions and the things that Chris and I have mentioned. But candidly, if you want to work, if you're ever just looking for some advice or some feedback or some ears to help you unpack and put together that information, that's what we're here for.
Awesome.
Before we move on to the next question, will you guys drop your contact information into the chat so folks can have that real quick?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Let me check the chat here. As you're entering your contact info, Robert is asking, to have the relationship with the franchise department. Is there a percentage taken from the business if working with you, or how is that structured?
Great question.
Yeah,
that's a great question, Robert, and it's one that we get all the time. There are relationships in which that may be appropriate. There are plenty in which that it is not, Robert. And the way that we think about it, as we enter a relationship, that is the last thing we're thinking about in terms of, hey, do we want to be on somebody's cap table? Do they want us on the cap table? As we go forward, if that is the potential, Robert, in the future, we will take time and investment on our part, always from a time and experience and team members perspective, sometimes from a capital perspective, to make sure that we are the right partner for a brand and they're the right partner for us. We are not upfront. If we were to meet today, Robert, and you were to see a proposal from us, nowhere on that proposal is percentage ownership coming to our company from your own. That is something we work towards over time and make sure that we earn, as well as ensure that we're the appropriate fit. And I like that question a lot, because I know that is something that I'm sure if people have spoken to other groups in the industry like our own and have thought about doing some of this, that is a pretty typical deal point in terms of kind of where some of this comes from. And obviously, if there is need for capital injection, if there's need for other pieces of the puzzle to help answer that question affirmatively of yes, franchising is the right pathway, that question, that conversation can come up, but it's over time, it's through a built relationship, and it's earned. It's not something that we know that as we dive into relationships, as we work with different brands and partners, we've got to be a right fit, and those things don't happen overnight. And those we would take a long time to make sure it's appropriate for everybody. And to affirmatively answer your question, no, until we get to know each other very well, until we know we are the right fit, we are not here to take percentages of your franchise or business.
Piggybacking off of that question, what are kind of general upfront costs that business owners may need to have to spend in order to franchise?
Yeah, I'm going to pass that to Chris from just a quick high level. Chris, give we have a great range, Claire, in terms of like, hey, what a future franchisor should have as available capital. And then Chris, maybe break it down in some of the key categories for what that could look like.
Yeah, I mean, the range is intentionally broad, and it needs to be kind of, fine tuned and curated to match your ultimate goals and where you want to go. If you want to sell 100 in the first year and create, maximum value, that's going to require a little bit more than not. But generally, we kind of build a framework between 250 to all the way up to maybe $1 million. And that is inclusive of working capital to basically fund maybe that first year or so of the business. There's kind of the pre-launch that includes legal, maybe a brand, a set of brand guidelines, a well-built ops manual. Augmenting your team is potential. There's some consultation involved. There may be, if you're a brick and mortar brand, we may want to have a national construction costing index or a construction manual. So all those things kind of stack together. And then once you launch, you're going to need to have some sort of PR/marketing and branding that's going to announce to the world that you are a franchise. And ultimately that's how you start to build your pipeline of interested candidates. So we really take our time to fine tune each of those buckets. Some of that is capital that is needed near the front end. Some of that is dispersed through the journey of pre-launch, launch, and growth. And some of it may already be baked into what you've already built. So if there's things that we can leverage from your proof of concept already, we absolutely look at that and take credit. And that may whittle down that number that generally falls between that 250 and $1 million.
Okay. Great. And then I know you all have alluded to this over the whole presentation, but talking about the timing, I'm sure there's not a way to, distinctly say it's going to take 12 months or 18 months, but what is the timeline look like?
So we typically, from our first conversation, and we very proudly go on, as we call it, a few dates. We'll have probably a few rounds of maybe up to a month of conversations, just getting to know each other and how we're going to work together. Then answering the why, the how, the what, the when, all those questions, and really understanding what the franchise strategy is. We put that in about 2 months. And then if we start, proverbially swinging hammers and building the franchise program, it's probably about 3 to 4 months, soup to nuts. And it may vary just based on the brand, the model, the team that we're working with. But if you talk about first conversation all the way through launching a franchise and starting to build interest in your franchise, you're probably looking at 6 months all in to do it properly.
Great. Sure, that gives
a
folks
quick question. Have you? I think it was great that you shared the information about making sure that your vendors and your partners are ready for that growth as well, because a lot of clients we work with intentionally work with other small businesses in the region, to kind of, support each other. But on a different note, have you guys seen like a growth in like, especially since COVID, like home-based business franchises coming your way?
It's probably the number one sector, not only because of COVID, but I think just in general. The adage is people spend money on their house, their kids, and their pets. So even in economic downturns, or in the case that happened in 2020 through 21, the pandemic put us in our homes. So that, a lot of home service brands really skyrocketed and got a lot of lift during that. So we absolutely see a ton of growth in the service sector. And then also kids and pets that, people, they make the world go round. So people spend money there.
That's true.
Yes. All right. Well, we are rounding out the hour. Great. Thanks for sharing your information here. I'm sure folks are interested to have some more conversation. I don't see any more questions. I've really enjoyed your presentation. It's great to have some kind of framework to even start the conversation. So, and I will likely send folks your way as well. So thank you, Chris and
Thank-
James, very
yeah.
much.
Claire,
Thank you,
we'll
Claire.
have,
Make
Thank you, everybody.
We'll be, if you guys will share your slides with me, I'll push that out with the recording to everyone.
Great.
And also, as we wrap up here for folks viewing still, we have a quick survey for you. So, Claire, do you have anything else?
Nothing else to add. Thank you all and have a great Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks,
James.
everyone.
And Chris.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Mhm.